Hi everyone, nice to see you all. Welcome back to the channel. Today it's going to be a bit of a blather. You know I like to blather, just talk off the cuff on various subjects of interest, hopefully mutual interest. Today I'm going to be talking about something that makes language learning special. When I say special, I'm referring to something that makes language learning different to learning anything else that you can, in principle, learn. You could think of different ways in which language learning was special. You could think of different things about it that made it stand out from other activities. But there is one thing in particular that is perhaps not touched on enough, and that is what I would like to talk about today. If you want to learn to play chess, if you want to learn to play the piano, if you want to learn to be, a rally driver or whatever it may be, you have decided to acquire a skill that by default human beings do not possess at all. Nobody naturally knows how to play chess, nobody naturally knows how to play the piano, nobody naturally knows how to be a rally driver. Of course, different people will have different degrees of aptitude with respect to these things. Some people will learn quickly, some people will learn more slowly, some people will have very high ceilings, some people will have much lower ceilings in terms of how far they can develop each of these skills. But that said, we're all starting from scratch, and we are all to some extent treading the same sort of path as we try to make progress with these skills, right? The thing about language learning is that that's not actually true, and even if you think of some of the ways in which it is true, those ways are not of any value or any significance to us when we decide to learn a foreign language. So let me try and explain what I'm talking about. When you learn to speak a language, when you decide to try and learn to speak a language, you are deciding to try and acquire a skill that is already possessed by some relatively large, relatively substantial number of other people. But those people have acquired it. I'm talking about the natives specifically here, not everyone who knows the language. Those people have acquired it in a way that is radically different to the way that you are going to acquire it. You cannot retread their steps, right? Why not? Well, because they learned the language basically growing up as a little kid. And although we sometimes have the impression that little children learn languages effortlessly, that is certainly false. Little children make a massive cognitive effort to learn their own languages. But when we reach a certain age, we don't have any recollection of the effort that we made to learn the language in question. I speak English natively, hopefully that's clear to you. I don't have any recollection of what I did to learn English. Yes, I remember going to school and reading and learning to write vaguely. I remember these things. Yes, I'm not denying that I have memories of all of this sort of stuff. I'm not denying that I have memories of my formal education, but actually learning to speak English, this is just something that I've always been able to do, right? Because obviously as we get older, we lose our memories. For whatever reason, we lose our memories. That connection we have with this struggle to learn our own native language, we just don't remember it, we don't feel it anymore. Yeah, as I sometimes say, we just open our mouths and the language comes out and that's it. And we never had to worry about how to pronounce it. We never had to worry about what sort of accent we were developing. We just, on the whole, developed the accent that was spoken in the community we grew up in. So when you're learning a foreign language as an adult, let's say you're starting in your late teens or as a young adult, you are trying to develop a skill that is already possessed to an extent that is almost disturbing by presumably millions, sometimes tens, even hundreds of millions of other people. And that makes language learning very, very peculiar. There is no other skill at all that is possessed to an exceptionally high level, a level that you cannot, realistically speaking, ever hope to attain, by large numbers of other people who have no perception that it's difficult at all on the whole, who have no perception that they ever struggled to learn it. Imagine if there were a country somewhere with 50 million people in it, and imagine that every single one of those people could play the electric guitar at an incredibly high professional level without ever having made any specific conscious effort to learn the electric guitar that they can remember. They're just awesome at it, right? They're absolutely awesome at it. And they just seem to be able to do it they just seem to be able to do it naturally. They may actually have had to put effort into it as young children, but that's all gone now. That's in the past. Now they can just do it, right? Now let's say you set yourself the task of learning the electric guitar. Imagine how intimidating it is. Imagine how frustrating it is. Imagine how disturbing it is to constantly have to make comparisons between your own meager level of ability in the early stages and the almost godlike abilities of these 50 million people who live in this country where everyone can play the electric guitar. Think how dispiriting that might be. Think how much of an idiot you might feel like. Think how much you might question your own intelligence, your own abilities, your own aptitude. That is what it's like learning a foreign language. And you have to somehow find a way of dealing with that and asking yourself what it is that you're doing and what you're doing it for. Human beings are naturally competitive to a greater or lesser extent. We naturally seek social status, and sometimes social status accrues to us by virtue of the fact that we're good at things, right? Sometimes it accrues to us because we have money. Sometimes it accrues to us because our parents are famous. Sometimes it accrues to us because we're good looking, especially if we're female. But sometimes it accrues to us because we're good at things. But what does it mean to be good at something when there are already 50 million people who are effortlessly much better at it than you are ever likely to be? That's what language learning is like. And it's worth stopping and thinking about that. If you're very talented and you work at a language very hard for a long time, then I believe that it is true that you can come to be native-like some of the time, at least in some contexts, depending on what's been important to you, depending on what you've worked on the most. But realistically speaking, for most of us, those native-like levels of ability are not accessible. And even if they are accessible to you, you can't expect to achieve them over and over again with lots of different languages. That's completely unrealistic. What that means is that overwhelmingly native-like ability in any context, for any period of time, is likely to be out of the reach of even talented and dedicated people on the whole. So when we speak foreign languages, again, most of us, most of the time, are destined to speak them suboptimally. We can't speak them as well as we speak our own languages. We can't understand them as well as we understand our own languages. I'm not talking about reading and writing here. Those are perfectly worthwhile subjects, but they're not the focus of this discussion, right? We can't speak these languages as well as the natives, and we can't understand them as well as the natives. And that has implications for the effective scope of our social interactions, and maybe business or career-related interactions in those languages. This is not supposed to be any sort of discouragement, right? I've studied foreign languages. I've spent colossal amounts of time studying foreign languages, and I still do that. But we should be aware of the fact that there's something profoundly unusual about these attempts we make to develop this specific skill set. We should understand that when we speak with the natives, and we are presumably learning these languages to speak with natives on the whole, not with non-natives, when we speak with the natives, we're always inferior to them. We're always the ones who are struggling. On the whole, there may be exceptions, there will be exceptions, but this is a very applicable general rule, right? A very widely applicable general rule. We're the ones who are struggling, we're the ones who didn't catch that, we're the ones who didn't know what that word meant, we're the ones getting left behind, we're the ones stumbling over our words, we're the ones who can't remember that word that we learnt last week, we're the ones who can't think how to phrase things, we're the ones who can't pronounce phonemic distinctions properly. We are the ones who are struggling. And I do think it's worth bearing that in mind and understanding what sort of thing you've got yourself involved in. If you decide that you want to learn to play jazz piano, then it is highly unlikely that you're ever going to rank amongst the greatest jazz pianists who ever lived, who ever existed. But hey, so what? If you come to be competent, you play in a jazz band somewhere, you play for fun, maybe you play professionally. You don't have to be the best in the world. We accept that there's a hierarchy of skill. Yeah, not every composer is a Beethoven, not every artist is a Michelangelo, not every jazz pianist is an Art Tatum. We get that, right? We understand that. But the weird thing about foreign language learning is that there can be 50 million Beethovens, 50 million Art Tatums, 50 million Michelangelos, and that's a weird type of skill to develop. Of course, I'm not suggesting that every native speaker has the same level of ability in their own native language. That's certainly not true. You can just listen to different people speaking. Our reading comprehension isn't at the same level. We certainly don't have the same level of ability with respect to writing. But none of that alters the fact that there's a certain bedrock competence that is shared, I think, by all the native speakers of a language. They can do things pretty much effortlessly, despite the fact that these things seem to be incredibly hard to us, certainly in the beginning. I think it's worth understanding up front in advance when you start learning a language, or when you're thinking about learning a language, that that is the type of thing that you have got yourself involved with. I speak Spanish to some extent. There are probably about 400 million native speakers of Spanish. And I have learned Spanish to communicate to some extent with them, precisely with them. And when I do that, they're always better at it than I am. Because my Spanish is okay but not wonderful, they are substantially better. I hold my own better in Japanese and in Russian, but of course the Japanese are still much better than I am at Japanese, and the Russians are still much better than I am at Russian. And you feel that if you're honest. And you can use that as a type of motivation to keep studying, to push on. You can look at the natives and think, I know I can't get there, but I want to get closer at the very least. None of this is intended as discouragement. There's no reason to feel discouraged by any of this. But I think it's important to understand that in this respect, language learning is completely unlike anything else that you can learn to do. If you decide to learn to juggle, everybody else who can juggle had to learn from scratch. Nobody came out of the womb juggling. Nobody learnt it automatically as a baby, as a toddler, and realized at the age of 6 that they could juggle 11 balls. That kind of thing doesn't happen. But language is peculiar like that. And it's a perspective that isn't presented very often, and I just thought that I would talk about it a bit today. Anyway, that's it. I'm done blethering. I'm going to go. Thanks very much for listening. If you want me to make videos on any particular subject, I can certainly do that. So until next time, thank you very much, and ciao ciao, bye bye.